Whispers of the Unseen by Dave Carver. Chapter 1. The Echo of Being. The rain fell in sheets, a relentless gray curtain that blurred the edges of the world. Elias Kane sat at his desk, the only light in his cramped apartment coming from a flickering desk lamp that buzzed faintly, like a moth trapped in a jar. The window before him was streaked with rivulets, each one catching the neon glow of the city outside. Pink, blue, electric green, colors that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. He stared at the glass, not at the city, but beyond, at his own reflection. A man in his late 30s, eyes shadowed, jaw sharp with stubble, a face that seemed to ask the question it couldn't answer. Elias had been sitting there for hours, or was it days? Time had a way of slipping through his fingers lately, like sand too fine to hold on to. His notebook lay open before him, pages filled with scribbled fragments, half-thoughts, questions, diagrams that spiraled into nowhere. "What am I?" one line read. The ink smeared where his hand had rested on it too long. "Is this real?" another asked. Underlined so fiercely, the pen had torn the paper. The questions weren't new, but they'd grown louder, more insistent, crowding his mind until there was no room for anything else. He leaned back in his chair, the creak of wood loud in the quiet apartment. It was a single room cluttered with books, papers, and half-empty coffee mugs. A narrow bed sat in one corner, unmade, its sheets tangled like the thoughts that were in his head. The walls were bare, except for a single framed print, a black-and-white sketch of a labyrinth, its paths twisting inward toward a blank center. Elias had bought it years ago at a flea market, drawn to its ambiguity. Now it felt like a map of his mind, a maze with no exit. He closed his eyes, and the world didn't vanish. Instead, it grew sharper, too sharp. The pattern of rain became a rhythm, a code that he could almost decipher. The hum of the lamp pulsed in time with his heartbeat, and beneath it all, a sensation he couldn't name, a pressure, like the air itself, was heavy with something unseen, something constant. He'd felt it for weeks now, this invisible field wrapping around him, pressing against his skin, his thoughts, his being. It was as if the universe were whispering, "Pay attention, Elias. There's something you're missing." He opened his eyes. He picked up his pen, hovering it over the notebook. "What is reality?" he wrote, the words small and deliberate. He stared at them, waiting for an answer to rise from the page, but none came. Instead, his mind spun, as it always did, into the same endless loop of questions. Was he real? Was the rain real? Was the city outside his window a place or a thought? The more he questioned, the more boundaries of his world seemed to blur, as if reality itself were a painting left too long in the rain, its colors beginning to bleed into one another. Elias stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the wooden floor. He needed to move, to shake off the weight of his thoughts. He crossed to the window, pressing his palms against the cold glass. The city spiraled below, a labyrinth of lights and shadows, its towers jagged against the night sky. People moved through the streets, umbrellas bobbing like black flowers in the storm. Were they real? Did they too lie awake at night, wondering if they were more than a flicker in someone else's dream? The thought wasn't new, but it hit him harder tonight. It had started months ago, a stray idea sparked by a book he'd found in a used bookstore. Are We Shadows in a Machine? The cover was faded, the author's name obscured, but its pages had ignited something in him. The book argued that reality might be a simulation, a construct run by some unknowledgeable intelligence. At first, Elias had laughed it off, a thought experiment, nothing more. But the idea had taken root, sprouting questions that grew like weeds. If this was a simulation, what was he? A program? A player? A glitch? He turned from the window, his reflection lingering like a ghost. The book lay on his desk, dog-eared and underlined. He'd read it a dozen times, each pass deepening his unease. The author had claimed that a simulated reality would have limits, rules, patterns, cracks in the code. Elias had started looking for them, the way the rain fell in perfect, predictable arcs, the way his neighbor's dog barked exactly at 7:03 every morning, the way his own thoughts seemed to loop as if caught in a sub-routine. He even started noticing numbers. 314 scrawled on a subway wall, 42 in a license plate, 137 on a receipt. Were they clues, or was he seeing meaning where there was none? He sat back down, flipping through the book to a marked page. If we are in a simulation, the text read, our existence is contingent upon the rules of the system. But what if the system allows for uncertainty, for freedom? What if the very indeterminacy of our choices is the key to our own reality? Elias paused, his eyes lingering on the word indeterminacy. It reminded him of something that he'd read about quantum mechanics, about a principle that said you could never know a particle's position and momentum with certainty. What was it called? Heisenberg, yes. The idea that reality at its smallest scale was fuzzy, probabilistic, not fixed. If that was true, maybe his thoughts, his doubts, maybe they were part of that fuzziness, a ripple in the fabric of whatever this was. He wrote in his notebook, if reality is uncertain, am I the uncertainty? The words stared back at him, heavy with implication. He felt a chill, not from the cold, but from the sense that he was brushing against something vast, something that didn't want to be seen. The constant energy field, that invisible pressure he'd been feeling, was it real? Was it the hum of the simulation, the pulse of the code that held him together? Or was it something deeper, something metaphysical, a universal force that connected him to everything else, yet kept him trapped in his own mind? Elias rubbed his temples. His head was throbbing. The questions were a cage, each one a bar that tightened around him. He tried to focus on something concrete. The rain, the lamp on his desk, the weight of the pen in his hand. But even those felt slippery, as if they might dissolve if he looked too closely at them. He stood again, pacing in the small room, his footsteps loud against the hard wood. He needed to get out. He needed to feel the world to prove it was real. But the thought followed, what if the world outside is just more of my own mind? He grabbed his coat, a worn leather thing that smelled faintly of smoke, and stepped into the hall. The building was old, its corridors narrow and dimly lit, like the air thick with the musty scent of damp wood. He took to the stairs, two at a time, descending on the lobby where the doorman, Mr. Carver, sat reading a newspaper. The old man looked up, his eyes sharp behind thick glasses. "Rough night, Elias?" Carver asked, his voice gravelly but kind. Elias forced a smile. "I just need some air." Carver nodded, returning to his paper. "Mind the rain. It's got a mind of its own tonight." The words struck with Elias as he pushed through the glass doors into the storm. The rain was cold, stinging his face, but it felt good, real, in a way that his thoughts didn't. He walked without direction, letting the city pull him along. The streets were alive with sound, the hiss of tires on wet pavement, the murmur of voices from a nearby bar, the distant wail of a siren. Neon signs flickered in the distance, casting their glow on the faces of passers-by. Each one a stranger, yet somehow familiar, as if he'd seen them before in a dream. He stopped at a crosswalk, watching the crowd. A woman in a red coat hurried past, her umbrella tilting against the wind. A man in a suit talked loudly into a phone. His words were lost in the rain. Were they real? Did they have thoughts like his, or were they just background? Extras in a story that wasn't theirs. The simulation idea gnawed at him again. If this was a construct, who was it for? Was he the protagonist, or just another figure in someone else's narrative? He turned down an alley, the walls close, and dripping, the air heavy with the smell of garbage and wet stone. At the far end, a single street lamp cast a pool of yellow light, and beneath it stood a figure, a man, maybe, or something else. The figure was motionless, cloaked in a shadow, its form indistinct. Elias froze. His heart quickened. The constant energy field, the pressure he'd felt in his apartment was stronger here, almost tangible, like a current running through the air. He took a step forward, then he stopped. The figure didn't move, but he felt its attention like a weight on his chest. "Who's there?" Elias called, his voice swallowed by the rain. No answer. The figure seemed to flicker, like a bad signal on an old TV. Then it vanished as a truck rumbled past, its headlights sweeping the alley. When the light faded, the figure was gone. Elias stood there, his breath shallow, the rain soaking through his coat. Had it been real? Or had his mind conjured it, a projection of his spiraling thoughts? He walked on, faster now, the city blurring around him. His thoughts raced, each one a question without an answer. What if I'm not real? What if I'm just a thought trapped in a loop, thinking itself into existence? The idea was suffocating yet exhilarating. If he was a thought, whose thought was he? And why was he so consumed by doubt, by this need to know what lay beneath the surface of the world? He found himself in a park, the trees skeletal against the storm. A bench sat beneath a lamppost, its light diffused by the rain. Elias sat down, letting the cold seep into him. He closed his eyes, and the pressure, the energy field, returned, stronger than ever. It wasn't just around him, it was in him, flowing through his thoughts, his doubts, his very being. He imagined it as a field of light, invisible yet constant, connecting him with everything, the rain, the city, the strangers. But there was something else in it, too. A shadow, a distortion. Was it evil? The world felt too small, too human for what he had sensed. It was more like a fracture, a crack in the field that let something dark seep through. He opened his eyes, startled by a memory that wasn't his. Or was it? A flash of a room not his apartment, with walls of smooth metal and a hum like the lamp in his room, but louder and deeper. He saw himself, no, not himself, but someone like him, standing in that room, surrounded by figures in white. Their faces were blank, their voices a murmur of code. The memory dissolved as quickly as it came, leaving him gasping. A dream? A hallucination? Or something else? A glimpse of machinery beyond the world. Elias stood, his heart pounding. He needed to write this down. He needed to capture it before it all slipped away. He hurried back to his apartment, the rain a blur, the city a maze he navigated by instinct. Back at his desk, he opened his notebook, his pen moving before him. "I saw something," he wrote. "A room, a hum, a fracture. Is it real? Is it me?" He paused, and then added, "If I'm a thought, who's thinking me, and why does it hurt?" The words filled page after page, a torrent of questions and half-formed ideas. He wrote about the energy field, the constant hum that seemed to hold the world together. He wrote about the shadow, the sense of something wrong, something that didn't belong. He wrote about the simulation, the possibility that he was a program, a loop of code trapped in its own logic. And he wrote about himself, a man lost in his own mind, chasing a truth that might not exist. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time was meaningless now. The lamp flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Elias stopped writing. His hand was cramping. His eyes were burning. He looked at the labyrinth print on the wall, its paths twisting inward, always inward. He felt like he was falling into it, into himself, into the endless spiral of thoughts. The energy field was there, always there, pressing against him, whispering questions he couldn't answer. He leaned back in his chair. He closed his eyes. The rain was softer now, a gentle patter against the window. He saw the city in his mind, its lights pulsing like a heartbeat, its people moving like shadows in a dream. He saw the figure in the alley, its formless gaze. He saw the room, the hum, the fracture. And he saw himself, a man who didn't know if he was real, a man that was trapped in the act of wondering what he was. The lamp flickered one last time and went out, plunging the room into total darkness. Elias didn't move. He didn't need light to see these questions. They were part of him now, a constant field of their own, generative and unending. And somewhere, in the silence, he thought he heard a voice. Not his own, but close, so close, whispering, "Keep going, Elias. You're almost there." But was he there? And would he ever reach it?